You are being robbed right now. As you watch this video, you aren't being robbed by a criminal in a mask holding a gun. You are being robbed by the very money in your pocket. Have you ever asked yourself a simple question? Why does technology make everything faster, more efficient, and cheaper to produce? Yet your life keeps getting more expensive. Why did a single income in the 1950s buy a house, a car, and support a family of 4? But today, 2 incomes can barely pay the rent. They tell you it's inflation. They tell you it's supply chains, or Putin, or a virus. They are lying. What you are about to see is the story of a crime scene that spans 100 years. It is the story of how a small group of men, in a secret meeting, seized control of the world's engine and designed a system guaranteed to make you work harder while you get poorer. Henry Ford once said, "It is well enough that the people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." Prepare yourself, because once you understand how the machine works, you will never see the world the same way again. To understand the trap we are in today, we have to go back. Long before 2008. Long before the Great Depression. We go back to 1694. England. The country had been ravaged by 50 years of war. The king's coffers were empty. The government was desperate. They needed money, but they had run out of people to tax. Enter a Scottish banker named William Patterson. He proposed a solution that was as brilliant as it was diabolical. He told the king, "I will lend you the gold you need, but in return, you must give me the exclusive legal right to print paper receipts against that gold, and lend those receipts out to others with interest." This was the birth of the central bank, a private bank owned by private shareholders, given the government-sanctioned monopoly to create money out of thin air. It worked for the bankers. They became the true power behind the throne. But across the ocean, a new nation was watching. The founding fathers of America hated central banks. Thomas Jefferson called them more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. They fought 2 central banks and killed them both. For decades, the United States resisted. It became the world's greatest industrial power without a central bank. The currency was backed by gold. Prices were stable. A dollar saved was a dollar earned. But the bankers didn't give up. They knew that if they could capture the U.S. money supply, they would control the world. They tried in the open. They failed. The American public knew what a central bank meant: wealth inequality, boom and bust cycles, and poverty for the masses. So, the bankers decided to go underground. November 1910. A private train car leaves New Jersey. The blinds are drawn. Inside are 7 men. They represent the wealth of J.P. Morgan, the Rockefellers, and the Rothschilds. Combined, these 7 men controlled an estimated 1/4 of the world's entire wealth at the time. They were traveling under code names. They were forbidden from using their last names, even with each other, to avoid servants discovering who they were. Their destination: Jekyll Island, a remote, exclusive hunting club off the coast of Georgia. Why the secrecy? Frank Vanderlip, one of the attendees, later admitted in the Saturday Evening Post, "I was as secretive, indeed, as furtive as any conspirator. If it were to be exposed that our particular group had got together and written a banking bill, that bill would have no chance whatever of passage by Congress." For 9 days, they sat in a room and drafted the Aldrich Bill. Their goal was simple: to create a central bank for the United States, but to brand it as something else. They knew Americans hated the word bank, so they called it the Federal Reserve System. It sounds governmental, doesn't it? Federal. Reserve. It implies it's part of the government, like the Supreme Court or the Army. But it is neither federal, nor does it have any reserves. It was designed as a cartel of private banks, given the power to control the national currency. When they brought the bill to Washington, they used the ultimate deception. The bankers publicly attacked the bill. They wrote op-eds screaming, "This bill will ruin the banks." The public thought, well, if the greedy bankers hate it, it must be good for us. It was a Trojan horse. On December 23, 1913, while most of Congress was away for the Christmas holidays, the Federal Reserve Act was pushed through and signed into law by Woodrow Wilson. The coup was complete. The keys to the kingdom had been handed over, and almost immediately, the stability they promised vanished. But here is the scary part. The Federal Reserve was just the vehicle. The weapon they use is a process so confusing, so boring-sounding, that 99% of people tune out before they understand it. It's called Fractional Reserve Banking, and once you see how it works, you will realize that the money in your bank account isn't actually there. So, who controls the money? You might think it's the government. You might think money represents the sweat of your labor, or the gold in a vault somewhere. You would be wrong. In our modern system, money is created in two places, and in both places, it is created out of absolute nothingness. Let's start at the top. The Federal Reserve. When the U.S. government spends more than it collects in taxes, which happens almost every year, it needs cash. It doesn't print it. It issues an IOU called a Treasury bond. The government sends this bond to the Fed. The Fed receives the bond, and in exchange, they send money to the government. But wait, where did the Fed get that money? They didn't tax anyone for it. They didn't dig it out of the ground. They simply typed a number into a computer. Don't believe me? Here is a quote directly from the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. When the Federal Reserve writes a check, there is no bank deposit on which that check is drawn. When the Federal Reserve writes a check, it is creating money. If you or I did this, writing a check from an empty account, it would be called fraud. We would go to jail. When the Fed does it, it's called monetary policy. But that's only the beginning. The real magic trick, the one that affects you directly, happens at your local bank. Most people believe that when you go to the bank to borrow $500,000 for a house, the bank is lending you money that other people have deposited. Like a piggy bank. Grandma puts money in, the bank lends it to you. That is a lie. That is not how banking works. In reality, 97% of all money in existence today is digital. It was created by commercial banks when they issued loans. Listen to Graham Towers, the former governor of the Bank of Canada. Each and every time a bank makes a loan, new credit is created. Brand new money. The moment you sign that mortgage paper, the bank types $500,000 into your account. They didn't take it from anyone else. They created it. But here is the catch. You have to pay it back, plus interest. So, if the bank creates the principal amount, the loan, but nobody creates the interest, where is the money to pay the interest supposed to come from? It comes from more loans. This brings us to the most terrifying realization of the entire system. Mariner Eccles, a former Federal Reserve governor, admitted this to Congress. If there were no debts in our money system, there wouldn't be any money. Our money is debt. For the system to keep functioning, total debt must increase forever. If we paid off all our debts tomorrow, every single dollar would vanish from circulation. The economy would collapse. We are trapped in a system that requires infinite growth, infinite debt, and infinite consumption on a finite planet. But the system wasn't always this broken. There was a time when money was real, when it was backed by gold. So, when did we lose our way? We can trace the death of honest money to a single day, August 15th, 1971. After World War II, the world operated under the Bretton Woods system. The US dollar was the world reserve currency, but it was strictly pegged to gold. $35 equaled 1 ounce of gold. This kept politicians in check. They couldn't just print unlimited money because they didn't have unlimited gold. It was a golden age of prosperity. The middle class thrived. A single income could support a family. But politicians like to spend money. In the 1960s, America was burning cash on the Vietnam War and massive domestic social programs. They printed more paper dollars than they had gold to back them up. Other countries, especially France, noticed. They saw the US was cheating. They started demanding to exchange their paper dollars back for real gold. Gold began draining out of Fort Knox at an alarming rate. America was bleeding out. President Richard Nixon had 2 choices: stop spending and balance the budget. The hard choice. Default on the promise to pay gold. The easy choice. He chose the easy way out. Temporarily. It has been over 50 years, and that temporary suspension is still in place. On that day, the US dollar became a fiat currency. Fiat is Latin for "let it be done." It means the money has value only because the government says it has value. It is backed by nothing, no gold, no silver, just faith. Look at this chart. This is the smoking gun. Before 1971, as workers became more productive, they got paid more. They shared in the prosperity. After 1971, productivity kept rising due to technology, but wages flatlined. Where did all the extra wealth go? It went to the top. It went to the asset owners. It went to the people closest to the money printer. Since 1971, the dollar has lost over 85% of its purchasing power. This isn't an accident. This is the feature of a fiat system. It steals value from savers and workers and transfers it to debtors and banks. But if you think the inflation of the 1970s was bad, you haven't seen what happened in 2020. What the Federal Reserve did in the last few years makes 1971 look like a joke. We are now entering the endgame. In the next chapter, we will look at the era of quantitative easing and how the events of 2008 and 2020 have set the stage for the greatest financial transfer in human history. And more importantly, is there an escape hatch? The year 2008 was a warning shot. The debt-based system finally hit a wall. The housing bubble, fueled by the Federal Reserve's cheap credit, burst. The entire global financial system was days away from total collapse. In a free market, the reckless banks would have gone bankrupt. The bad debt would have been wiped out. It would have been painful, but the system would have reset. But the Federal Reserve didn't let that happen. Instead, they invented a new term, a term designed to sound boring so you wouldn't ask questions. Quantitative easing, QE. QE is just a fancy word for printing money to buy government debt. They flooded the market with trillions of dollars to prop up the banks and the stock market. They kicked the can down the road, but they didn't fix the problem. They made it bigger. And then came 2020. When the pandemic hit, the government panicked. In just 2 years, 2020 and 2021, the Federal Reserve printed nearly 40% of all U.S. dollars in existence. Let that sink in. It took the United States over 200 years to create the first 60% of its money supply. It took 2 years to create the rest. They told you inflation would be transitory. They lied. This is the Cantillon effect. When new money is printed, it doesn't get distributed equally. It goes to the banks and corporations first. They buy assets, stocks, houses, crypto, before prices go up. By the time the money reaches you, through wages or stimulus checks, prices have already skyrocketed. The rich got richer because the money was printed. You got poorer because your savings were diluted. It is a wealth transfer mechanism disguised as relief. We are now addicted. The moment the Fed tries to stop printing, the market crashes. The moment they print, inflation soars. They are trapped. And so are we. So, is there a way out? Is there a lifeboat on this sinking ship? History says yes, but you have to know where to look. Throughout history, every single fiat currency has eventually failed. The Roman denarius, the German papier-mark, the Zimbabwean dollar. The average lifespan of a fiat currency is just 27 years. The US dollar is living on borrowed time. To protect yourself, you must step outside the system. You need hard money. Money that cannot be printed by a politician. Money that requires work to create. For 5,000 years, that answer was gold. Gold is scarce. It is durable. It has no counterparty risk. That is why central banks are buying record amounts of gold right now, even while they tell you to hold dollars. Watch what they do, not what they say. But in 2008, in the depths of the financial crisis, a new form of hard money emerged. An anonymous creator named Satoshi Nakamoto released a document titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Bitcoin was not just a new technology. It was a protest. Embedded in the very first block of Bitcoin's code was a message. The Times' 003 Jan 2009 Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. Bitcoin solved the problem that gold couldn't. It is digital, portable, and verifiable. But most importantly, it is finite. There will only ever be 21 million bitcoins. No government can print more. No CEO can dilute it. It is governed by math, not by men. This is why, despite the volatility, despite the news calling it dead hundreds of times, it keeps coming back. Because it is the only life raft large enough to escape the flood of fiat currency. Whether you choose gold, Bitcoin, or real estate, the lesson is the same. Do not save in paper. Paper is designed to lose value. Save in assets that are scarce. We started this video with a quote from Henry Ford, fearing a revolution if people understood the banking system. Perhaps the revolution isn't riots in the streets. Perhaps the revolution is simply opting out. The system relies on your ignorance. It relies on you working hard, saving in a melting currency, and staying in debt. But now you know the truth. You know that the Federal Reserve is not federal. You know that money is created from debt. And you know that the inflation you feel is a policy, not an accident. This video might make you angry. Good. Use that anger. Educate yourself. Read The Creature from Jekyll Island. Study the history of money. Look into Bitcoin and sound money principles. The financial world is shifting. The era of the US dollar dominance is cracking. Those who prepare now will not just survive the transition. They will thrive. If you found value in this documentary, if it opened your eyes, please share it. The algorithm doesn't like this kind of truth, so I rely on you to spread the word. I'm 30 Minutes Economics, and this has been the story of your money. Thanks for watching.